the early days of Nisos, sort of, we a lot of our incident response stuff ended up being leading towards attribution and leading towards that as a means of having, getting an understanding as to how the actors were acting, what they were doing, what their behaviors were, in order to identify how they were, how to slow them down and stop them and prevent them from repeating their behavior.
Welcome to the award-winning Cyber5 podcast. Here, we discuss the most relevant cyber and physical security challenges facing enterprise businesses today. I'm your host, Landon Winklevoss, co-founder of Nisos, the managed intelligence company. Vincas, Ciziunas, welcome to the Cyber5 for the first time in your Nisos. Give a little background for our listeners, please.
I had 20 years of experience in information security, both in the commercial spaces back in the dot-com era and working in government spaces as well, going back and forth, sort of, bringing back experience to share in either direction to help both secure and protect networks. Sort of get most of that was network security, with a little smattering of threat intel type stuff. Nisos has been a fun experience. I've enjoyed helping to build it with yourself, and I look forward to continue making it grow. Maybe if you put me on the podcast sooner, we would have grown faster.
All completely fair, and Justin and I, really find it a privilege to have met you and to have worked with you and to really have developed the company really on your expertise of not only brilliant investigative means, but also quasi-developer, quasi-analytical, kind of put all of it into one. And it's, truly, and a lot of people who've been in this industry know it's hard to find, somebody who has the smattering of disciplines. And you certainly do.
I'm certainly a jack of all trades and a master of none.
So Vincas, there's a lot of lingo and language that's very Nisos specific. One of those, of course, is the dog pile. In your own words, what is the dog pile? Where did it start? What has it become? Because that is a term of art that everybody in Nisos will come to appreciate while they're here and after they leave, potentially. Why is it so special?
The dog pile is sort of a bet in a way on us all being able to accomplish things as a team faster than one or two investigators. It's usually applied when there's an emergency or when there's a really cool research topic that needs to happen, and it's a bet that's usually worked out for us. Everyone works. One person's chosen as the arbitrator, or one or two people are chosen as the arbitrator of the task, and everyone goes out and researches the thing all at once, sort of coordinating so that we don't completely step on each other's toes. But a lot of times you'll have two sets of eyes researching, looking at the same data, the same piece of data, and noticing something different about it. Collectively, we end up coming up with a better picture of an individual just by having all of us look at the same thing.
What you kind of just encapsulated was it's a group of like-minded investigators that bring a variety of different skill sets, from open source intelligence to offensive security to defensive security, sometimes to engineering, analytical expertise, that come together to really solve a problem and to ultimately, do great storytelling that our clients can then go to their stakeholders. And that's exactly what we'll be kind of talking about here over the next, 45 minutes. So let's get into it. Talk through there's a lot of investigations that we could easily, go through.
So early on, we were doing a lot of work for platform companies. A lot of times, we used to do red teaming, and we also used to do incident response. And the incident response sort of led into the game of trying to attribute the actors a lot of the time. Two of the platform companies that we dealt with, we had a similar situation. We had individuals who stole some of the platform source code and were making use of them to, either share them externally or shut them down. In one case, we had we reached out to a provider. We filed the necessary paperwork to get more insight into what was going on, and he told us, the in this case, the actor was using this server hosting company as a middle ground to both attack the platform over the Tor network, as well as which is how we actually got insight into him using this provider, but attack the platform and try to leak the source code. The provider realized that this guy was using email addresses incrementally, and he was giving us a heads up when the guy created a new account. And we were able to figure out that he was, increasing the number on his email address, and so we were able to warn the places where he was sharing the source code. Hey, this guy's gonna be creating an account now with this number. And so we could watch him do things. We had a similar situation with another person who was using a similar attack, a methodology, using a hosting provider as an attack platform, and that provider gave us insight into what alternative contact mechanisms the actor had used when he registered his account. So he was effectively, we ended up getting his Jabber handle that he ended up using everywhere. He used it in gaming. He used it in his criminal history, and he used it all the way back to high school, which wasn't that far from where he was. We were able to use that to track him back to his house, and his parents' house, in fact, which is where he was living. The early days of Nisos, sort of, we a lot of our incident response stuff ended up leading towards attribution and leading towards that as a means of having, getting an understanding as to how the actors were acting, what they were doing, what their behaviors were, in order to identify how they were, how to slow them down and stop them and prevent them from repeating their behavior.
This is near and dear to really how Nisos started, right? So, kind of to back up, as we were doing these investigations, usually incident response companies that we all know well were getting called to do kind of cleanup on aisle 9. And there was something more existential to the company's risk where they had to go down this attribution path, so to speak. And then, of course, that's when we got called, and we got queued up to do this largely investigative work. Often with outside counsel who's able to file the subpoenas and getting all the necessary information from some of the hosting providers. But I mean, I'm curious, what was the existential problems that these companies were facing early on? What was the point to take them beyond just calling the incident response company?
The incident response company would generally try to do the cleanup, like you said, cleanup on aisle 9. But if you have an actor who's gone in there and who's stolen all of your stuff, you can clean up after the way they entered. And that doesn't mean they don't have insight into how else to get in, and how else to tweak things, and how else to shut down your business, and what drives them. One of those two that I mentioned, the one where we found the guy in his parents' basement, was interested in just making money, and so he found a couple of things, and he told the company about one of those things that he had found. But as it turns out, he'd had several other ways to try to extort the company further. And we were able to help track things back that way. The other platform company where we had the guy um, registering with the incremental email address, he was sending the source code back to his midpoint and then deleting portions of it. Then he was threatening to leak stuff to render the platform useless. That guy just wanted to destroy their business. He had a vendetta against one of the individuals that worked there, and he was going to make it known. It was personal. So the best way to solve that problem before being able to identify, link it back directly to him, was to try to slow down his progress.
I think it's important to understand outcomes from some of these things. Like sometimes it's important to be able to pinpoint who did what, right? I think in the greater context of issues, right? But other times, sometimes you don't find out who it is. So with the issue that with the actor who had the vendetta and who wanted to destroy the business, I don't think we actually, if I remember correctly, I don't think we actually identified ever who that was. However, in the discovery of a lot of the things that were on the hosting service, we found a lot of old files that had been deleted from the production environment, and we were able to restore that. And then on the other side, when we had the issue of actually identifying somebody, there were issues within that company where they needed to, attribute that person and ultimately get them under NDA. And that was important. That was an important business decision, right? Outcomes to business decisions are really what drive this. And if I recall correctly, I think that's where a lot of good outcomes can be delivered in not just, of course, the big incident response companies mitigate risk, cool, and get you back up to, get you back up from, preventing confidentiality and integrity and availability of data systems, networks, get you back up to speed. But then ultimately, they're still not necessarily solving the business problem. I'm just kind of curious of your comments just around where the outcomes have been just critical with those two cases, and they're very different, obviously.
Yeah, they are different. The outcome, they were able to attribute that one guy that was causing a threat to their platform, and they were, they brought legal action, started to bring legal action against him. The other one, like you said, they never identified who it was. They had a suspicion, but the guy was pretty good at covering his tracks insofar as who he was. Like I said, he made a few mistakes that leaked, where his midpoint was, and we used that midpoint against him to, slow him down. He started trying to destroy the company again, and we helped them bring their stuff back up faster than, constantly faster than before. That basically made the hours that he spent of his time trying to, plant the dynamite to blow things up, turn out to be duds and feel like a waste of his time. I mean, these guys, time is money, and if you can't figure out who an actor is, you can make them waste their time on things. They'll give up.
What kind of mistakes do these actors make? That's always the interesting part of all these types of things.
They reuse handles. They they even if they create handles that are unique to the action, they reuse those. They they think that provides them sufficient cover. Sometimes, the one guy that was, planning the dynamite was using VPNs and Tor, and he got sloppy and he didn't turn on his Tor at one point, that leaked that midpoint provider, and that gave us that provided us a gigantic win, because we were able to get back the deleted platform data.
When people reuse selectors, and I think this will start going forward the next cases we're talking about, right? I think the key thing that you said is when you ultimately get information from the hosting providers, and you start getting selectors, and you start getting more context beyond just IPs and domains, that can really be the keys to the kingdom. Kind of walk through that methodology, how you walk attacks back to actual individuals and groups.
There's one guy that was making threats against a company, and he used a handle that indicated that he was interested in CrossFit, and we could tell, that he was a CrossFitter. We could tell that he was what state he was in, and we couldn't tell who he was until he posted an image on the site, that he was, the forum that he was posting to, where he had made a reservation for made a reservation for a product that was a competitor product for the one that he was kind of poking at and making threats against. And that reservation had a number, and the reservation system turned out to be a Android and iPhone app, and we were able to work out that that Android app, the API, would leak. Not You couldn't directly query the user ID to get back a username or anything like that, but every user on that app had a chat channel that they were in with the developers of the product. And you would get a list of every member and their name and their location and their email address. And we could walk that. We knew that it looked like the reservation IDs and the chat channel IDs, they were incremental with time. So a higher number would be created at a later date. But we couldn't tell, that depended on when people made their reservations. So I found a set of reservations that were created, an ID that was created a week before this guy created that reservation. And I started walking through I had a script that would go in and walk through and pull all of the chat channel information. And I went to bed. And the next morning I came back and I went through it and I looked to see if the guy had his handle there. And apparently he did. And his handle was his email address. And we had his first name and we had his last name and we had the city that he was in. He had a fairly common name. It was about as common as John Smith. But John Smith, who is really big in the CrossFit community in this state, in this city, became a really, really small circle of people. And we were able to trace that back to who he was based on we were able to take hundreds of thousands of individuals registered on a forum and turn it into three potential people that we could trace it back to. Then it becomes looking at the individuals themselves and trying to see, okay, which of these guys would have an issue against that company, and only one of them did.
And now, if you don't mind me asking, that level of brilliance did that play out over a week? Did that play over a month? Most of the time, we're getting to some type of name, individual, or group attribution within 72 to 40 hours, and it is not taking an exorbitant amount of time, of course, based on data, just like anything. But we're not talking about like gigantic lifts that cost millions of dollars.
No, not at all. Not at all. It's not gigantic lift.
Like not even hundreds of thousands of dollars, frankly.
No, it took us maybe 4 days at most, and the bigger part of the lift was digging into the individuals' forum posts to try to characterize, hey, this guy's into CrossFit. Hey, this guy's living here, and to kind of create, here's what we know about the guy, which is sometimes enough to attribute them, to give us enough of a lift to attribute them. But then, there were the types of, there's the type of people that look at technical data, and there's the type of people that look at human data. And you'll sometimes have people that look at both. It was a crew of people looking at human data, and they, saw this, he posted this, this reservation, and we saw the ID number, and started, zagging down that path to try to look at the app to see if there was anything that might help us, leaking things there. And it was that app analysis portion took about 4 hours to get to the point of being able to find a path. At which time, it took over, like I said, it took overnight to be able to walk all those ID numbers to get the right one. And attribution it's not always about identifying the individual. Sometimes it's about getting enough information about them. We don't always, it's not always the external data that tells you who the individual is. Sometimes we'll get looking at the, we had a customer who received an email threat, and they had no idea who it was. We looked into it was the guy used a free email provider, but we did identify that the email provider would use a certain geolocated server for sending email out for individuals based on what part of the world they were from. We noted that to that, hey, this guy's probably coming from this part of Europe or this part of Asia. And that rang bells in the client's mind because they'd had in an internal incident of some sort that I don't know the nature of it, but from everything that they've told us, they'd resolved it all internally because they had that little nugget that let their internal investigators, let them hone in on where the threat actor would be. It gave them enough to be able to tell their internal investigators, their insider threat investigators, hey, we got a threat. It was in this part of the world, and we recently had a problem in that part of the world. You said you didn't have enough to go on. Is this enough to go on? And they were able to track back to the individual who made the threat.
Context is king, is what you're saying, and is the name of the game.
Absolutely.
If we're talking about, a email service that's usually a throwaway email service, there's thousands of them out there. How did you even think to have the wherewithal to start saying, okay, this email service's logs, they ultimately send logs to a certain location a certain way?
If you are involved in building out a large, ethically distributed network, or involved in securing them, like you get an understanding that if a server is too far away from a user, they're not going to want to use your service because it's going to be really slow. This was a bigger problem back in the day of dial-up modems, but that type of network design has carried over even through to today. They're still localized so that human beings could look at an IP address and recognize. There's some people that can look at an IP address and tell you what part of the world it's in, and those guys are the people that run a lot of these networks. They're the ones building these networks out. You can simulate that by creating one of these free email addresses, logging into different parts of the world and seeing if you come out of a similar source network when you send an email.
That's pretty. And did you write your own program to do this? Did you have tools to be able to kind of just see that external telemetry?
In that case, because this is an older, we were doing that manually. But yeah, we've got tooling that does that for us to some degree now to get a better idea of where email comes from and when you send stuff out.
We do a lot of investigations as a managed intelligence company, right? That's not just cyber investigations. That's not just insider threat. We get a lot involved in physical security and fraud as well. What are some of the best investigations that ring true to you on those perspectives as well?
We've done some, just like we had to reverse an app to try to attribute someone. We've had situations where we've had to identify application abuse, where the platform was abused in a way to game the system so that the users could win the day, win their prizes.
Yeah. So like very typical like rewards card fraud, or kind of like gaming ticket master, so to speak, to kind of cut in line to get a popular ticket on sale. Something similar like that, you mean?
Normally it's all about timing and about being able to tap on time. And if you have an app that automatically, checks and taps for you, um, you win. Like people used to do, calling into radio shows to be the 10th caller. There were so many apps that were gaming this one platform that one individual, in the process of us we identified the platform gaming system, and we're able to identify its infrastructure. But there was another individual who was pretending to have a platform to game, or one of these hacks, and he was calling out on forums to have people send him money. And as it turned out, he used his own PayPal style thing to receive the money. And as it turns out, he was an employee of the platform provider who decided that, well, we can't find who any of these guys are, so I could pretend to be one and make a couple bucks.
They think that they can just make money the easy way and just have. There's an arrogance a lot of times to these things, isn't there?
Yeah. He had the insider knowledge to sound believable enough that he was able to talk the talk to get people to think that he knew enough about the platform to be able to win it, because he did know enough. But he didn't even bother to develop a solution. He just his solution was to trick people into giving them their money.
A lot of enterprises think that this is like espionage is just meant for for nation states, or you hear stories of insider threat of people like Aldrich Ames or Robert Hansen in enterprise. I mean, usually it's just people who have an arrogance to them that want just an easy way to make some money, or ultimately have a vendetta against the company. Would you agree that's probably more accurate?
Those are generally the people who think that they couldn't possibly get caught. The arrogant, that kind of arrogance is always there.
Speaking certainly of arrogance that's always there, when you have actors who directly threaten executives, right? And I think this is where attribution ultimately a lot of times is interesting. There's no shortage of enterprise executives that get that receive threats. Sometimes attribution works. Sometimes you don't even need attribution. You just need to be able to find out that they're not located in an area they're claiming to be, therefore thereby mitigating the threat, right? Like what's some recent examples or some notable investigations?
Yeah, we've had some investigations where the threat actor, who it wasn't clear that they were a threat or not. Of course, there were some where they are a threat, but they make concerning comments to individuals or their family, to try to gain access to the individual. They do the normal thing that threat actors will do: mask themselves, use throwaway email accounts. We were able to determine that those are throwaway email accounts. But in some of these cases, one of the individuals was doing this to a lot of different people, and we were able to identify a pattern of this individual emailing a lot of people, and we did engage with him to pretending to be related to a third party's secretary, pretending to have received an email from him, which we actually didn't. And as it turns out, he responded, and we were able to send him something that told we were able to use that engagement to identify that the guy was not even in the U.S., which was the major. Once we were able to tell him, this guy was in Southeast Asia, all bets were off. Game over. There was no worry. They were concerned. The big concern was, this guy had written the granddaughter of an executive to try to reach out to him, and they were worried that this guy was, someone who was, down the street from this guy's granddaughter, and would be a threat for not responding.
How'd you find out he was from Southeast Asia?
We emailed him a link pretending to be something that he was interested in looking at. We were able to see that he was coming from Southeast Asia, and also identified He later accidentally sent us an email from, again, they make mistakes. He sent us an email from his personal email address instead of one of his fake emails, and it turned out to be this guy in Southeast Asia. It was his email address, and he had a social media account where he was posting, that he'd reached out to people and to see how that they responded to his jokes.
And then so then the ultimate outcome really was he's located in Southeast Asia. He's not down the street.
Right, exactly.
This is a complete scam. Disregard.
This saved them money on having to hire security for the granddaughter of this executive.
Vincas, just like anything, when you start a year, you go through and lay out what the mission, the vision, the strategy are, for growth. And there's always a conversation of why you exist. You've been the personification of why we have existed over the past 7.5 years, and why we will continue to exist for many years down the road. And it means a lot to Justin, myself, and everyone at Nisos. And David too, as well, our CEO. So thank you very much for the friendship, the relationship, and I can't thank you enough.